Curious people of Reddit, what's your if I'm going down and taking you with me? Story. Story 1, I was rock climbing, and this guy who was my belayer for the day was Kindoff. Well, no surprise, Dickwad spends most of his time flirting with a cute girl who is friendly, but seriously not into him. He gets chewed out by our lead for not paying attention, which means he continues to not pay attention as he is incapable of picking up cues. Well, there's me 25 feet or so off the ground with my rope slack and feeling my hand slipping because I'm just running out of steam. Now, having told him 3 times to pick up the slack, I look down and see he's completely ignoring me to chat with this girl again. My mistake was looking down. As I reach to readjust my weakening hold and slip, the rope shoots out of his limp, sausage-like fingers, and I began to fall. I know a properly tied-off rope shouldn't do that. I don't know how he that up too. My only thought is if I'm going to fall, well, land on him. Well, I did. I landed straight on his cushy body. I was barely injured. He was taken to hospital after having 80-odd kilos land on him from 2 stories up. I never happened to see him at that rock climbing club again. Story 2, I had a group project I had to do with 4 other people. 3 out of the 4 were great, but there were roles each of us had to fill in the group for the project to work right. The final girl never once participated in the project, so her role was completely empty, and it was dragging the rest of us down. We couldn't just fill in for her either, because she kept her specific instructions to herself the other 3, and I did the best we could, but our instructor didn't seem impressed. He had a few questions about how we came to our conclusion and who did what in the group. The other 3 were trying to keep focus on the roles they filled, but the instructor was asking about the role that the one girl skipped out on. I answered that we didn't have anything from that role, because Witzer didn't come to any of the project sessions. We just did what we could without her. Until that point, the girl that didn't do was standing there acting like she deserved any of the grade we all got. Once I said something, the other 3 girls confirmed that yes, Becky's did 0 of the work. She tried to say she was just really busy, but another girl shut her down by saying she saw her at several parties the past couple weeks. That girl got a 0, and the rest of us got like an 85 or around that number. I felt like a snitch, but that girl. Story 3, when I was in 8th grade, we had to create a presentation on a book we had just read, including a skit from one of the scenes. Hey, race the best part. We were forced to work in groups. Being an introvert, I hate group work. What I hate even more is when your group mates don't do their work. The day we were assigned a project, we decided to divvy up the slides equally. It was a Google slide, so we could all contribute to the same document. The class ended, and I had already finished one of my slides. One boy only changed the color of the title, and the other 2 didn't do anything. 2 days later, I had finished all of my slides. Nobody else had done anything. I offered to start the script for the skit since I had finished, and asked for the others to contribute. Nothing. A couple more days passed. I had finished the skit as well, and all of the other slides were still empty. Finally, the night before the assignment was due came. I had hoped that even a title had been added. The slides were still empty. I finally decided to just finish it myself. I was up until about midnight, and the slides were not the best quality. Finally, presentation day comes, of course. My group mates felt absolutely no remorse for doing no work. It was our turn to present, and my group mates nominated me to present. I finally decided to show them the consequences of their actions. I told them that we were all to present the slides we were supposed to work on. They obviously didn't know what they were doing and were extremely unprepared. My grade went down, but theirs went down even more. Story 4, when I worked as a case manager as an MHMR, we had a new department supervisor come in, and she was the worst. Every single person but myself and another case manager quit within the month of this woman starting. I really liked my job, and it was also my internship site for my master's degree, so I needed to stay employed there. Since so many people quit, this lady got permission to hire, and it soon became obvious that she wanted to get rid of anyone she hadn't hired and have a department full of people she had personally chosen. Surprise, surprise. Most of her hires were shitty, just like her. On top of being an awful human, she also had very little background in mental health and gave truly awful supervision when it came to clients and getting them the services they needed. Since I wasn't a part of the people she had hired, I knew she would try to get rid of me, so I made sure to document everything. Anytime I staffed a client with her, I would document her advice in that person's chart, as well as the actions I took due to her advice. I also kept a detailed paper trail and would email her questions about policy so that I'd have record of her answers, which usually were the opposite of what her policy actually was. She even started walking to my desk to verbally give me answers to the questions I sent via email, and I'd have to make up some excuse as to why I needed her answer in an email, like I would tell her a parent or client had asked, and I wanted to be able to give them a verbatim answer. I could tell she hated it. Anyway, several months later, I staffed a client with her who I believed needed to be hospitalized and wanted to run it by her first as she demanded. The kid was suicidal, homicidal, and impulsive, which is a recipe for disaster. She disagreed that this kid needed hospitalization and told me to refer the client to another agency because apparently the client was too high risk for us but didn't need to be hospitalized. I tried to get her to agree to just call in crisis to assess her, but she denied that as well. I documented what she told me to do and referred out. Well, literally a day later, this kid brings a gun to school and gets in a ton of trouble. Obviously, thankfully, he was stopped as soon as he stepped through the metal detectors. Mom is pissed that my agency just referred him out and didn't get him the help he needed, and a day later, he plans to shoot up his school. My supervisor is pissed, as this is a PR nightmare, and comes down on my supervisor, but since I was the direct care staff assigned to this client, my supervisor blamed it all on me. I ended up getting fired for my negligence. However, the higher-up, of course, carefully went through this kid's records and saw all of my documentation regarding the awful decisions my supervisor had made, which lead the higher-up to investigate even more. Basically, there was Medicaid fraud being committed. This lady was lying about her mileage and being reimbursed way more than she should, and all this other lovely stuff. So she was fired as well. I was asked to come back, but that place and its corruption. Story 5, when I was stationed in Korea, my sergeant threatened to tell command I was drinking underage. Fortunately, I had pictures of our squad drinking, and he was present, so I told I would show them to command if he told on me. Story 6, current job. Previous manager, I was on a team of 2, and when the lady I worked alongside with quit, they decided not to replace her. I have a young child, who as children so often do, get sick a lot. Being the only person on my team and the most important role for our office to function, since it is literally the first step in all our processes, I had a very hard time whenever I used my PTO with short notice. I had given my manager multiple ways to fix the issue, but she never would hear any of it. She also was in a remote office, so she had zero clue what I did with my day. She finally sent me a very angry email, basically telling me I could not use my PTO for emergencies all the time when my son got sick. I wrote back a long, detailed list of every method I suggested to fix the issue, along with the fact that I was the only person in my position for months, and that our company policy states in bold letters that using PTO because you or your loved one is sick is not only acceptable, but encouraged. My manager responded to my email by stating she would forward my concerns to HR and that I should probably polish up my resume. But HR was in our office that day for the first time in 6 months. Great coincidence, right? So I went in, asked if I could speak about an issue concerning my manager, and explained everything as it happened. The HR rep had this look on her face like she was going to murder someone. She asked me to forward the entire email chain to her, which I did. Then she called me back to talk to her. A few people I talked to were aware that the manager and I had issues, and the lead of every team in our office basically told the HR rep that the entire office can't function without me and that I've been doing the work of 3 people for 9 months. Later that day, my manager sent me a very angry message over email, basically saying I was fired and that I was to pack my things immediately for failing to do my job. And because I was causing a hostile work environment, I forwarded this to HR rep and then walked to her office and asked if I should pack my stuff. She looked at me and in a single sweet sentence said, "Not a chance. She's royally." And that's basically how my manager went from making $80K a year to being fired on a Wednesday with no compensation, no benefits, and no way to collect unemployment, all around a productive day. Story 7, my uncle used to own a hardware store in our shitty little town. He wanted to put up a cover between 2 buildings that he owned, but the town council wouldn't let him. They never gave any real reason, like, we need to leave the area uncovered because of XYZ building codes. They just went on a power trip and said, "You're not going to do it." Eventually, due to some other power trips, my uncle threatened to move his shop a few towns over. Town council went all, "You're not going to do it in I dare you way." So my uncle did just that. If I remember correctly, he paid the most in taxes, so all the money the town was getting from him disappeared. Most of his employees were in high school and couldn't drive. When he moved, the kids went with him. Since the parents had to drive their kids to their job, they decided they would also pick up groceries and other things they needed while they were in the new town. So the cloth shop and grocery store went out of business. Since no one could get what they needed in our small town, just about everyone moved. Now the town is run down, and there's barely anything here. My dad said it used to be a nice little town. Now hardly anyone lives here, and everything is falling in. My uncle even warned the council, if I leave, I'll take this town with me. But they didn't listen. Story 8, I once worked for a startup company, and they missed one of my paychecks. It wasn't a gigantic deal to me, because they were a bit strapped for cash, and we had a big release coming soon, and I was decently paid anyway, so I just said it. They then fired me 2 days before release, making it sound like I'd been inadequate despite zero indication from them that I was such before that day. So I made the proper legal arrangements to recoup my missing paycheck and told them being in the labor industry, I had already filed a complaint because if they were going to fire me after I worked 70 hours a week for over a month to try and meet their deadline, out of nowhere, I sure as wasn't going to cut them the slack of an entire paycheck. I got my paycheck. They went out of business because they were corrupt and had been misusing investor funds for years before this, unbeknownst to me. And I laughed my way to the bank. Story 9, super simple, but I am notorious in my friend group of having a fear of water. Am okay in pools since you can hopefully see the bottom, but even shallow lakes, rivers, and oceans are no-go for me. Some friends ended up renting a boat and wanted to take it out on the lake and beg me to come out. I kept telling them no way and would I ever willingly go out and sit in the middle of a lake. Finally, I caved because I didn't know. They were friends and really wanted me to go. Someone said it could really help me face my fears. Even though I didn't plan on getting in the water and not going to wear jeans to the sunny beach. So I left my wallet, keys, and phone in the car. Within 10 minutes of getting to the middle of the lake, Buddy, who suggested I face my fears, and I think his brother asked me if I got the time, I shrug and tell him I left my phone back in my car. They both lunge at me and start throwing me overboard. I latch on for dear life and fight as if the river is lava, because to me it essentially is. I eventually realize I'm 100 going over, and there's nothing I can do except let go of the railing I was gripping onto and instead grab them both as I pulled back and forced all three of us into the water. Getting back on the boat was easy. It had a little ramp and ladder for climbing in and out, and you can bet I was the first climbing back up. The brothers got mad at me because they had their phones in their pockets, and I ruined them, but everyone quickly pointed out that they pushed me in the water knowing I hated it, and that they deserved it. They argued that they intentionally tried to make sure I didn't have anything electronic on me, but everyone shut them down. They were allowed back on the boat when they apologized. My friend apologized, and I actually did chip in to help him get a new phone later, but his brother swam back to shore and got even more upset and demanded I help him with his new phone since I helped his brother, but he didn't feel bad or think he did anything wrong, so that guy. Story 10, in third grade, my friend told my crush I liked her, so I told everyone he put a finger in his. He didn't, but I had a reputation for never lying, so they believed me. Story 11, got a bad math teacher fired when I was in high school. He taught advanced math for the older high school kids, and the guy really was a math genius. He didn't want to be a teacher and didn't have a knack for teaching. His style was more, it's right there, just do it. And we were all like we're 16 and taking pre-calc. You need to break it down for us. This is a Nike commercial, but he never did. He always skipped steps, and we all were struggling. And we were kids who were talented with math and always got good grades, and we're in the accelerated math program. Over half of us were failing his class. I kept going to the principal and the head of the math department with complaints, and I encouraged all my classmates to do the same. Some kids dropped the class, but I stuck with it because I was determined that if I was going to fail that class, I was taking the teacher out with me. He wanted to be an expert mathematician for the government anyway. Teaching was just a fallback option for him. He told us about it all the time. So after half the class failed his class, and the school had gotten a multitude of complaints about him from his students, they still couldn't fire him due to tenure. So the following school year, they scheduled him to supervise study halls and answer phones exclusively and didn't give him any classes to teach. He threw a fit and refused to do it. So they got him for insubordination. He has since moved on and landed his dream government job. And the school is rid of one shitty teacher. So overall, it was a win-win, even though it brought my GPA down. Story 12, when I was in university, I did a 6-month exchange program in Spain. I took 4 classes while I was there, and all had an equivalent credit at my university. In Canada, I was getting as in all of my classes except one class where I was really struggling, and getting a failing grade on an assignment in that class finally broke me. The prof for this class was the worst. It was an intermediate Spanish class, and he was marking us like he thought we should all be writing Shakespeare. Not only that, but how he told us to complete assignments versus how he marked them would be completely incongruent. He expected us to be doing things that he never taught us, and he should not have been expecting in the first place from an intermediate Spanish class. I realized it wasn't just my problem when the girl from France, whose Spanish was far better than anyone else in the class, started crying one day after she got an assignment back and begging to understand why she was marked so poorly. He just pointed at her assignment like that was the only explanation required, and then ignored her after that. There was no way to drop the class or switch into another because of the way it was built into the exchange program. So I decided I would start emailing the teacher constantly after he gave us assignments, clarifying every little point, coming back with follow-up questions to try and figure out what it was he actually wanted from us, spending way more time on assignments than they deserved. That way, if I failed, I would have this record showing how hard I was working in the class to bring to administration if I needed to fight it, and all the discrepancies between how he provided assignments versus how he marked them. A couple of days before the final exam, teacher evaluation forms came around, and I could tell by how long it took all of us to turn them and that I wasn't the only one in the class unloading on this guy. This was his first semester teaching at the university, so if his teacher evaluations didn't go well, he wouldn't be invited back. If I failed this class, then at least I wouldn't be doing this to someone else next semester. We get our final marks a week later, and I've managed to pull a C out of my grade, just squeak by. Then with final marks dispersed, he's allowed to see his teacher evaluations. He sent an email to the entire class that night and lost his friggin' mind. We're talking sections with all caps, multiple exclamation marks, telling us how stupid we all are and how we don't know what we're talking about. He's the greatest teacher alive, and we're all just bad students, complete meltdown. The next morning, I found another email, from the university this time, stating that professor is no longer with the university and will not be welcome back again, followed by numerous apologies regarding his behavior. I inquired about our grades in light of what happened, but I guess they weren't that apologetic because they refused to change them. Go figure. Story 13. In 7th grade, my teacher decided to use process drama to teach about the Holocaust. He told us we can hide anywhere in the building, and if we successfully evade him looking for us, we will get a bunch of extra credit. Conversely, if we are caught, we will get 5 points for each other classmate we rat out. I hid successfully in the computer class under a spare TV cart that barely fit me. My soon-to-be-not friend had chosen poorly in the same room and was easily found. Upon walking out, I very clearly remember him yelling, "Wait, Yams is in the corner under the cart." I can't remember being so mad at someone. Ratted out for a mere 5 points. I yelled at him and deaf overreacted. The lesson being a process drama. That was kind of the point, to experience the fear and potential rage of your neighbors for ratting you out. For those of you who don't know, this lesson style is to give the student first-hand emotional connection to whichever content you'd like to teach. It's incredibly effective TLDR. I was taken down along with a classmate and lost extra credit. Story 14. I was at a church camping trip for boys at Yosemite. One of the guys in charge was new and real. He made it his goal in life to punish every kid. I was a real rule follower, so he couldn't punish me, and he started getting angry about that. He would even drop comments like "your turn is coming," etc. Now, when I was younger, I was really thin and small, but in my mind I was like all the other kids and mentally tough. So this got me in trouble. I would get injured on these trips, and the head guy was always getting in trouble with my parents for not keeping me safe. So one of the rules is that nobody can ever be alone. If you are caught alone at any time, you are in trouble. So we're getting the campfire ready for lunch, and some kid comes running up to the group and says that there's a woman bathing naked in the river. All the kids get up and run to go see. So to not be alone, I have to go with the group. Now, I don't go to the edge and look because I didn't feel like it was right to go spy on the poor woman just trying to enjoy nature. Anyway, leader sees his opportunity and says that since I got up and went over with the group, I was also in trouble, despite the fact that I had no other choice. Punishment at this camp was holding a giant rock over your head. Somehow, I was the only one that got in trouble, not everyone else that looked, proving that he didn't care about actual rules, but just that he had power over everyone. I was supposed to hold this rock over my head for 15 minutes and then come back. Of course, he was too lazy to oversee punishments, so I was supposed to do this alone, which is another problem. Since there are bears and perverts around, no kid is supposed to be alone. So finally, since I didn't deserve this punishment, I was going to take this guy down, so I dropped the rock on my head on purpose. Then I just laid there. I could feel a large bump rising on my head. I must have laid there for about 35 minutes. Finally, they realized that I didn't show up for lunch, and someone asked where I was, and then everyone ran over to see me laying there with a rock next to my head. I said that the last thing that I remembered is that my arms were getting weak holding the rock over my head. Then the leader checked my head and found the bump. He was livid because now I had to tell my mom I got hurt again when asked why I was holding a rock over my head. I made sure to let them know that it was leader's punishment. He tried to deny it, but 25 young voices called him liar simultaneously. Since they had all endured the same punishment, leader was stripped of his power and spent the rest of the camp as just another camper. In fact, he called someone and left a day early. It was his first and last activity with the group. A couple years ago, I got jumped by 2 guys while I was on a business trip. I was a little drunk walking back to my hotel at night dressed well. So from the get-go, you know I'm a moron. As I was walking, I heard 2 guys yelling, but assumed they were just arguing among themselves and didn't even look back. I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head, and my legs went a little wobblier than before. This little head punched me in the back of the head like a coward. But I caught myself before I face-planted, and I turned around and grabbed the guy. At that point, I wasn't thinking much. I didn't register there were 2 of them. I just wanted to hit the little back. Side note, I'm 200 pounds at 511, not really fat, just a stocky person. The guy who hit me was much skinnier. I took the skinny boy to the ground by just running forward and holding his shirt. I think when I landed on top of him, it knocked the air out of him. Then my mind oddly remembered that one of the few moves illegal in the UFC is a 12 to 6 straight down elbow when on top of a guy. So naturally I did that. I got my elbow deep inside as I socket one or two times before I was abruptly reminded he had a friend. Boots taste like, and they really can break your concentration when violently introduced to your face. But as the proud owner of a Neanderthal brow line, my thick skull spare me from interruption. I put my elbow through that skinny boy's face another couple times while his equally little friend continuously swung his foot into my head. In that moment, I wanted to kill that kid. I didn't care what happened after. I was just going to make sure he regretted hitting me. I realize now that before and after that night, I have never really been mad, a little ticked off, sure, but never truly angry. After maybe the third kick, I was starting to really feel it. I was getting dizzy, and my face hurt pretty bad, so I stopped ice picking skinny brain and just covered my face with my arms. The other one pushed me off, though I'm pretty sure I helped after all my job was done and my head was swimming. Then they just kind of left. It was outstandingly awkward in hindsight. Didn't take my wallet, didn't get my phone, didn't say anything threatening. They just walked away, one holding the other up while I sat there and watched. As wrecked as my face was, Skinny S was a lot worse. Despite all the words I just wrote, this whole thing happened in under a minuet, I think. Adrenaline slows things down. But in reality, violence is fast, and people are pretty fragile. In those 3 or 4 kicks, my face was mangled. One eye was swollen shut, my forehead and cheek were all cut up, my teeth on that side felt loose, and my lip was in 2 pieces. But judging by the fact that my elbow looked like I tripped into a vat of ketchup, Skinny was a lot worse. Some woman apparently watched the whole thing go down. So cop cars pulled up pretty soon after, but whatever she saw makes no sense to me. No matter what I said, they were convinced this was a tussle between friends. She had thought we were walking together, then fought for fun or something. The cops kept asking me where my friends went, kept telling me that what I was doing could get me in a lot of trouble. Every time I explained what happened, they told me I was lying. The fact I still had my wallet seemed to convince them it was not a mugging or whatever. After what felt like an hour of bleeding out of my face and answering the same loaded questions repeatedly, they just kind of gave up. They drove off and left me a little paper instruction manual on how I could call them to follow up if wanted to. I think they finally accepted. I didn't know the other two because I was from a different state in town for like 2 days. I still had to walk back to my hotel at night with one working eye covered in blood. The shred of respect I had left for American law enforcement died that night. The first person to seem at all worried about me was the front desk clerk at the hotel. He was ready to call an ambulance, but I just wanted to sleep. I washed myself up and went to bed. The next day was one of the worst of my life. I still had a conference to attend in business attire, looking like I was an extra in Fight Club. And calling my mother she was so worried, it just killed me. It may sound up, but the one bit of solace I get is that I changed the geography of the little S face. My healed up in a few weeks. I know his didn't. Months later, I got mail from that police department saying that they were sorry, but they were not going to find anyone, and I could call if I wanted to complain. I didn't. Sorry for the tome. It's kind of cathartic for me to write it all out, and I thought it was relevant to OP's question. Story 15, I was bullied by an entire grade at one point in school. There were primary instigators, sure, but everyone else joined in at the drop of a hat. So it's fair to say I was not happy with pretty much all my peers. Well, at one point we went on a class camp trip. Everyone from our grade went. At one point a group of us went into the woods as part of a supervised activity, and almost everyone broke the rules on going out of bounds. I didn't want it because I was a bit of a rules person, but I got attacked and physically pushed out. Of course, the adults found out everyone broke the rules and started asking questions, but everyone clammed up. I ratted all of them out. No one escaped punishment. It was the nuclear blitz of ratting out. I had names, I had places they went, I had details, and they were kids, so they lied badly. So I got many of them caught in lies too. The adults chose not to believe me when I said I'd been dragged by everyone else. So I took the fall too, but it was worth it. We all lost privileges and a taste of freedom kids like us otherwise wouldn't experience again. I ruined that, and I loved every second of it. Story 16, when I was in my second year of Canadian high school, basically 8th grade. Our final English project was to make a movie in teams. This project was going to take half a year to make and was worth a lot of points in our grades. I was pretty hyped up because I love doing amateur movies. Our class had 7 boys, me, my 2 friends, 3 guys that were known for being lazy AF and unfun to work with, and another guy who was useless in the story. So me and my friends had to be paired in teams with the 3 other guys. But at least we were 3 willing to work, and one of the other guys looked to be willing to work seriously with us. Before we started working on the script, a group of girls were missing 2 people in their team, and my friend just joined them, leaving me with the 3 slackers. The whole process was a nightmare. We had a shared account on Google to keep the script and video clips, so we could all work on the project, even when we were not at school. The script that I almost entirely wrote was often griefed by one of the guys who found it funny to put racial slurs all over the script. While filming, my teammates kept dragging on and doing nothing. The racial slurs guy purposely took 2 hours to read correctly one sentence in front of the camera. We were not moving forward as fast as we were supposed to, so the teacher was suspicious of what we were doing. One day, I was forced to miss school because of a dentist appointment, and those decided to take advantage of my absence to go tell the teacher that it was all my fault for everything, including griefing the script. When I got back in the afternoon, I was stared at by the whole class and was promptly told by my teammates and by the teacher that I was now out of the project and would be getting a 0 if I did not give a complete script in a 5-minute movie. But it was for the next Monday, so I had only a weekend to make a half-a-year project. So I couldn't do anything and got a 0. I was pissed out of my mind. MD then, I remembered the shared account. I went back, deleted the entire script, and replaced the movie with a corrupt file, which they didn't check before giving it to the teacher. I don't know how, but the teacher managed to reserve a whole movie theater room for the sighting, and all the English students were there. I was able to see their confused looks as their movie didn't play, and everyone else too, since we all had a sheet with which movie was coming next. When the teacher checked, there was no script and no movie, so they got a 0 too, and since they forgot I could have still accessed the project, I got no, and the blame went to them. I might not pass my English class that year, but I made sure neither did them. TLDR, teammates ruin a project, put the blame on me, and make me have a 0. So I make them fail the class too. Story 17, when I was a little kid, my mom made me hold her hand to cross the street out of Publix, as parents do. She slipped on a wet spot on the street, screamed cocksucker, and yanked me down with her. Then she had some kind of misfired reflex and slapped her hand over my face to try to cushion my fall, I guess. At the time, I thought my mom was randomly trying to assault me, or SMTH, right in the God parking lot. Story 18 had an absolutely terrible boss at a hospital. She had been there for almost 30 years and was almost omnipotent. She was an absolutely horrendous human being in every way, shape, and form. She liked to pick one person every day at random that worked with her and pick on them until they cried. She would then fake false feelings about how sorry she was, that she didn't mean to do it, and so on. Our department ran the toys for Tots Drive at our hospital. She insisted that all toys were kept in her office. It didn't take me long to figure out she was stealing the toys. I took photographic evidence, as well as writing down everything I could in the ensuing months about everything she was doing. I knew at this point she knew that I did not like her, and that I had pretty much figured out what she was about. So she turned her attention to me and made my life miserable. I finally did quit. However, I made it my mission to take her with me. Everyone in the hospital, including the CEO, were somewhat afraid of her and were just trying to get her to her 30 years so she could go out naturally. After I quit, I sent photos and all of my written documentation to the CEO of the hospital, who I tried to talk about all of this stuff with before I left, but could tell he was not listening. I then wrote, if she was not dealt with, I was going to notify the local news channels about what I knew was going on with her. Needless to say, she was forced to retire immediately upon her 30th anniversary, which was a week away.